Hello everyone, good evening, and welcome to the Vancouver Public Library. My name is David Cheriandi, and I am a board trustee of the Vancouver Public Library System. I'd just like to offer some welcoming remarks and then turn things over to the hosts of this evening and to the illustrious poets we all are honored to listen to today. In recognition of Black History Month, we are delighted to celebrate the release of The Great Black North, contemporary, The Great Black North, contemporary African-Canadian poetry with support from Frontenac House Poetry. I know, as a fact, that this is, while there have been many anthologies of Black writing published in Canada over the 200 years of the publishing of Black writing in Canada, and of course the 400-year history, at least, of recorded history of Blacks in Canada. This is the first anthology of Black poetry in Canada. An extraordinary event, an extraordinary circumstance, considering both the volume and extraordinary quality of Black writing in this nation. Think of any major literary prize, and it's very likely, poetry especially, it's very likely that a Black author has won it. The Governor General's Award twice, the Griffin Poetry Prize, now the biggest poetry prize in the world. We have an incredible legacy of poets in this country. We also have, as this anthology demonstrates, an extraordinary range of poets and amazing up-and-coming poets as well. I'd like to acknowledge our co-sponsor, the City of Vancouver, the City of Vancouver, and I'd like to say that Black History Month activities have been organized by a dedicated group of individuals, community groups, and community partners. Together, they are delivering a diverse and engaging program of events through the month of February. Vancouver Public Library is proud to take part in this celebration of culture, art, history, and achievement. So please join me in a very warm welcome of one of the anthology's editors, Dr. Valerie Mason-John.
So hi, thank you for coming. Kevan and I will be emceeing this evening. I'll do the first half and he'll do the second half. Kevan taught me something in a workshop that he led on Saturday. So I'm going to plagiarize and he can beat me up after. I'm changing it slightly, but when I go like this, you say north, okay?
North.
The Great Black
North.
That's what we're here for. Okay. So, firstly, I want to thank my co-editor, okay, because without his presence in the poetry world, this would not have been possible. As you can hear from my accent, I'm a Black Brit, a new African Canadian, and so my co-editor actually opened up many doors to me, and so I have a lot of gratitude for that. So I just want to say thank you to my co-editor, Kevan Anthony Cameron. The Great Black
North.
Just want to say a bit about co-editing, because co-editing is a bit like a marriage. And we've weathered the storm. And as people will know, one of the tricky bits is always naming a book. And out of the two of us, Kevan is the intellectual one. And he kept on coming up with these intellectual names, and let's call it the Black Griots. And I'm saying, who's going to know that? And any of you who knows Adelaide de Soul Poet, I I said to her, I thought I'd start testing it on black people who I knew. She goes, Griot, what's that? You know, she's going. So I was saying, we can't have that. It's got to be something which is immediate. And we had one of those great conversations. It was just one of those conversations where we were just, I don't know, going back and forth. And out of that conversation, the name, the Great Black North, came out of it. And so it was, and we were laughing. It was like, let's call it the Great Black North. Really? And we just cracked up laughing, and that's how we landed with the name. So, the Great Black
North.
Okay, so I also, we have John over here, who's one of the people who is actually interviewed in the book. And I just really want to say thank you so much to John, because as David said, there's a real tradition of black poets in this country, and John is one of those who is legendary, from Ottawa, Ontario, and he was so generous, and so I just really want to say a big thank you to you. Thank you. And also to all the contributors who are here today, to Storma, to Joy, somebody who, it's so interesting, me coming to Canada. I was so ignorant. I think people like Joy and Vanessa Richards, I just assumed you were from America when you were in England. We just put you all in one bag, so it was just really weird just walking along the street and bumping into Vanessa and then bumping into you and feeling like a little bit of Brixton there. So big up for Joy Russell. For Juliane. And for Jillian Christmas. And of course, a thank you to our publishers, and a thank you to Vancouver Public Library for hosting this event for us. So, I just really wanted to say a few more words. The Great Black North. So, I've written something, and for me this is really important. So, this is what I have to say. I have much gratitude for the privilege of co-editing such a profound and insightful anthology of African Canadian poetry. As a new African Canadian, I needed to know what my black sisters and brothers were concerned about. I wanted to be able to pull a book off the shelf and have a snapshot of the history of black people in Canada. I needed to understand the new black context I was about to live in. The book has taught me things that I never ever learned in school or even spoken about in Europe or indeed in America. I came here thinking I had nothing in common, and soon learned that a part of my ancestry is steeped into the streets and oceans of Nova Scotia. Part of my black British history connected to the streets of Toronto. I got more than what I bargained for. I have made connections with some of Canada's best poets and writers. I'm proud to be a black Canadian, honoured to be an African Canadian, delighted to be Canadian. Oh, Canada. Thank you. So what is black Canadian poetry or African Canadian poetry? The Great Black
North.
So I'd say actually it's about tradition, it's about slavery, it's about colonization, it's about diaspora, it's about modern times. It covers all of that. So I'm not going to say anything more now. I'm going to introduce each poet, and including the editors, will be reading their poem from the book. So I have great delight to firstly introduce Jillian Christmas, who is the co-director of Verse Festival of Words. She has won Grand Poetry Slam Championship titles at both the Vancouver Bedrock Poetry Slam 2011 as well as the Vancouver Poetry Slam 2012. Let's have a big up for Jillian Christmas.
first I just want to say thank you very much to Queenie and Kevan for all the hard work that you guys have done on this anthology. And I would like to give some gratitude for being included in this and for being given the opportunity to share with such a wonderful audience. You know, it's not every day you get asked to be included in an anthology with so many greats, so it's a wonderful opportunity. And I'm going to recite the poem that I have in this anthology. It's very short, and since I'm a part of the slam poetry genre, I'm not going to read it. But I brought my book so that you can all see how beautiful and shiny it is. It's wonderful. Received in the mail. It was lovely. But yes, mine it's a very short poem, and it's entitled Fire. I do not need to tell you that you are enough. You already know that everything that you are is all that you need. Even though the weight of this world might sometimes bring you down to your knees, you must believe. The poet Rumi once said, "What do you know of your yet undiscovered beauty? One of these days you will rise from within yourself like a sun." And so I offer you these words from my own heart, lips, and tongue. If you look around you and everything is burning, licked in flames upreaching like a funeral pyre, check if you are breathing. If you are, it stands to reason that perhaps you're not the kindling, you're the fire. So we're also given the opportunity to just speak for a couple of minutes, and what I'd like to talk about is, you know, just the idea of sharing poetry. For a long time, I wrote and didn't share with anyone, nor did I think there was even a venue for me to share my poetry. It just kind of piled up in little books under my bed or in my room. And it wasn't until I learned about slam poetry online, through viewing poems that other people had shared, that I was opened up to this beautiful world of words, you know, coming from everywhere, and given the opportunity to really experience all of these people's their life experiences. And I think it's really important to provide venues for that, to provide books for that, to give people the opportunity to do that and continue doing it. Sometimes, you know, even now, on bad days you wonder, oh, why am I doing this? Why am I, you know, what more do I have to offer besides all, like, on top of all of this wonderful work that has already been offered by other people? But very recently I received an email from a person who had been at the Poetry Slam and heard that poem that I actually just recited, and she told me that she had been going through a very, very hard time, and she remembered that she had the CD, and she put it in, and that poem kind of helped to get her through. And that was the same thing that kind of happened for me when I first came into slam poetry. So I just want to give thanks again for all of these opportunities, and hope that they continue on, you know. Yeah.
So if you want Jillian to sign your book, you're going to have to be quick, as she has to leave to go to an event. Books are being sold at the back for $20. They retail, they retail at $23 in the shop, so a bargain. Okay, next up, born in Belize, Joy Russell. Joy Russell's work appears in numerous publications such as The Best Canadian Poetry in English 2008, and includes Days of Old, a pod play focusing on Hogan's Alley. Thank you. Let's have it for Joy Russell.
In the audience, it's great. First, I'd just like to say thank you to Kevan and Valerie and George Elliott Clark and Karina Vernon and Frontenac House and all the other poets that contributed to this anthology. These are always collective efforts and born out of much love, much patience, and much hope. I'm going to read ABC Passage, and in it there's a reference to Legba, and Legba is a Loa, a god from the Haitian Vadu, or Voodoo as you may know it, and he is the intermediary between the material and the spiritual world. ABC passage. Crossing X, anonymous name, Legba to get you over. Trickster marks the spot, black and frisk then, ready to rock, roll, rewind, what's left behind, what's up ahead. X in silence, two lines crisscross, double trouble, double bubble. Bubbly blind, bubbly bad, crossing X to get to Z, just to start all over on A. We'll spin, cycle the sea, dry that ham bone, been around and back again. Drift ashore on our own flotsam and jetsam, send a message in a bottle. Crossing X, the treasure hunt, booty bounty, bling bling. Pirates and profiteers working the alphabet to forget our names. You know, it's so low you can't get around it. So high you can't get. The signature tune, razzle, dazzle, and muzzle. Now tricksters got them by the long nose, all those fabrications for the emperor's clothes. A complicit crowd, fools bamboozled. Vocal cords unsane. We, earth, land, SOS stories in sand, every grain literate, each grain record. Thank you. I had to think about, we were asked to say something, and I thought about when my parents first gave me my beautiful blue Smith Corona typewriter for Christmas one year when I was about 8. And for me, it was a beautiful gift in the possibility and the importance of making art. Poetry for me is, it's a contemplative space at a time when we are encouraged to be perpetually busy. It is a place to bear witness and think critically at a time when we are forgetting and are assumed to be unquestioning. But mostly for me, it is a place of the imagination, which is a very powerful and immense space. I stand on the shoulders of believers, supporters, creators, and risk takers, those who have gone, those who are here, those who are yet to come. I thank you all.
Somebody asked me what does an editor do? Well, I'll tell you the word specification, stalker. And that, no, I'm being really, I'm not being really true. Our marketing director had to stalk somebody to get the contract signed, and the other is harasser. I mean, the amount of times that we had to send emails out for people to get back to us, oh my God. So that's the word specification. So if you're good at stalking and you're good at harassing, become an editor. Okay. All right, the Great Black. No. Okay, so I now want to introduce John Akpata. Is a spoken word artist from Ottawa, Ontario. John has been performing for over 10 years, has released 8 CDs, and has travelled and performed internationally. Let's have a big round of applause for John Akpata.
Get it twisted. There was a typo there. The editor had a typo. Oh. It's not 8 CDs, it's 3 CDs. Very understandable. Very understandable. And the intro was apropos because I was one of those deadline people that needed to be stalked. And, I don't think I was the absolute dead last person to get their stuff in. I think I was about the 4th last. Out of 90. It's true. But for Valerie and for Kevan and for everyone here, I was in a different place doing a lot of different things last year. And last year, this was probably the best thing that came my way. So thank you very much for all of that. And thank you to everyone for being here. I'm a spoken word artist, but today I get to be pretentious and read. The poem is called Ursula. He wails. Again and again and again, day after day, the thief on the corner has stolen a lifestyle that was never meant for him. He stands proudly, defiantly, openly, arrogantly on his urban garden balcony, surrounded by high-rise and condo and glass and concrete. This contradiction, this anomaly, he wails. Disrupting the pristine precision and the facade of high-end property in the midst of diplomats and ambassadors and embassies. With audacity, he stands unabashedly. He plays flagrantly and growls dastardly, labeled as disruptive and obscene. That messenger that blasts sound to the sky above, he wails. He ascends and descends that pentatonic scale, and inevitably the perfect tone intonation, that meticulous melody of the internal exacting metronome, fails. He rips the steadiness of sound. He blows solar flares into the clouds and shatters the sky, he wails. Like the revelation that John said, he wails. Like bagpipes at the gravesite of the setting sun, he wails. Breathing deep and roaring proud, like a giant making his declarations, he wails. Shirtless like Kuti, rallying for revolution, he wails. Like a mother wolf who by the full moon searches for lost cubs, he wails. Like Hendrix riding the feedback from the Marshall Greenback stacks, the delayed distortion of a crybaby phasing in a fuzzbox, he wails. Like Marley crying tribal to the people, he wails. The vibrato can be felt across the street, down the block, across the pedestrian bridge, and echoes into the canal. He bounces sound up and down the bland facings of his towering neighbors. He splatters them with noise graffiti, he wails. His hands curl and clack like claws on the keys. With the secrets of circular breathing, he takes no break. He has no pause. The brass bell expands and gets hot, he wails. Louder than the church bells at a wedding, he wails. Louder than the Parliament building's midnight ringing, he wails. More shrill than the police sirens screaming in the evening, he wails. Against the subtle muffled sobbing of lovers lost at night in the streets of Venice. That maze of endless cobblestones and canals. Streets unlabeled and shrouded in shadows. The endless labyrinth of streets too narrow to even be called alleyways. But there are boats on the Grand Canal. They are calling way from the distance, beyond the churches and the museums that echo, that rolls like laughing thunder, he wails. It screams out against the silence of a sleepy city. It is the opposite of a lullaby. It rattles the ears and invades the brain and shakes the heart, a piercing frequency. When you hear it, you can see it. From the blinding bright spot of sparks on the brakes dulling the rails of a train, the one that arrives only to take your lover away, he wails. And suddenly stops. That moment when all hope is lost, when our loved ones have been put on ships and finally disappear at the vanishing point upon the horizon. The mast, the stem, the sails, he puts her down and speaks her name. He wins. Very briefly, clearly the poem is about some crazy guy playing saxophone. The saxophone is an outcast instrument. It was supposed to be integrated into orchestra, and everybody hated it. And it is, my first bit of spoken word was djembe and acoustic guitar, and that's where everything came from. And about 3 years ago, a good friend gave me a saxophone, and I have learned how to breathe in new ways, and I have learned how to see the world in new combinations, and it has greatly affected my writing and my spoken word, and I am ever grateful for the person who gave me that saxophone. So thank you very much for having me, and I'll be in I'll be in Vancouver all week, so I hope to see you again at other events. Thank you very much.
So you've heard some of the poets refer to spoken word and slam, what's in the book. Well, we decided that we would categorise the book into page and stage. So page has print poetry and stage has slam, spoken word and dub. And for us it was really important because often black poetry is considered as protest poetry, as if it's not as good as the poetry which appears in books and on pages and on the print. And for me, where I learned poetry was in shebeens, raving in shebeens at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, listening to people toasting over a mic. I'm showing my age now, but that's where I learned poetry, and I was just so blown away by the lyrics and what people used to say. And it's really interesting that spoken word isn't given the same credit as page poetry, because one of the famous poets of all time we refer to is Sappho, and Sappho's work was spoken word. It was written to be performed to music. So I just, the irony of it. So I think this book is absolutely brilliant. It's got 3 academic essays in it as well, one written by the co-editor, Kevan. So it's a fantastic read. So I want Kevan to come up, because you know this is the first time, this is out, we're just about to go on tour. He's going to Ottawa, Ontario, and I'm going to Nova Scotia. So this is the only time we're going to be together. We're just asking this Siobhan here, she was going to get here after 6, I think. So I'm going to introduce now Juliane, who is an essayist and poet, whose work has been anthologized and published widely in literary magazines, online and in print. Let's have a big round of applause for Juliane.
Thank you to everybody for coming out tonight. Thank you to Kevan and Valerie for editing this awesome piece of work, and to all the poets, because there will be no poetry without poets, isn't it? I also want to thank Vancouver Public Library and acknowledge the land in which we are. I know we have few minutes for us to stand up on stage and say something, read a poem from the book and say something, but out of my 5 minutes, I just want to ask everyone to turn to each other for a minute and say something. Introduce yourselves, and then I'll come back. I'll take the mic back now. Alright, it's my turn. It's still my turn. Oh yeah. Point to the stage. Yeah. Guys on me now. Oh yeah. No, I don't have that kind of stage presence. Okay, my contribution to this book is a short poem called Diaspora. But rather than spend any time talking about writing poetry or about the poem, I just want to say a couple of words about it and then read to you a sister poem, just so you all know that I don't write dark stuff all the time. So diaspora is for those of us, in fact I think many of us, who come from a land far away, and it's often our hearts are somewhere else, but we still have to get up every day and do what we need to do to be in this place. So this poem is dedicated to those of us from the diaspora. I can't make it, the note said, so she sent flowers in her stead. I can't make it. There's a fire in the sink, the dog is barking, the children have run away. There's a run in my stocking, laundry to be done, and the stench of burned eggs. A cigarette butt in the geraniums, and breaking news on TV. I can't make it, the note said. So So she sent flowers instead. Flowers would have to do. They were a mixed bunch, a colourful bunch, playful, each complementing the other. Each louder and then softer, they sang a beautiful song. She couldn't make it, she said in her note. So she sent flowers instead, red, white, yellow, and pink, and the old one died blue, green, orange, soft, sweet, and 24. Still yearning, still believing the right to be, they were hacked at their slender necks, stuffed in clear plastic, bound with blue satin, and handed over with a panache and a smile. She couldn't make it, she said in her note. So she sent a bunch of flowers, sat on the couch, and imagined the half dead Congo flashed against the screen. Okay, this is an old poem I wrote 1,000 years ago, and really, I hope you can hear it as a compliment to yourselves. It's called People. I see beautiful people in trains and cars and classes and walls, in places where no one else sees them. In subways and bedrooms, on TV and radio, gas stations, apartments, on tree trunks and houseplants, on the post and the bathroom of a girlfriend's house. Beautiful people live on covers of novels, in movies of disco, in Playland, Milan, Paris, London, Nairobi, Lagos, and New York. Beautiful people smile from the covers of Vogue, Ebony and O, Mirabelle, Flair, and Chatelaine, and the ceiling of a certain young man. They're beautiful ones with moles on their right cheeks and left cheeks, on top of their hot lips, and bosoms and bottoms and chests and backs and legs and feet and hands. They're those with fat lashes, fat bottoms, fat lips, fat shoes, fat coats, and things to show up thin parts that send puke rising up your gut. I see beautiful people, thin-bodied, thin-lipped, thin voices, thin laugh, thin feet and thin trousers, their thin parts that sway the winds of Chicago. And through it all, I believe in the strength that comes through the veil, you, smiling, you of the Berber dress, and the grace with which you whisk away flies, stringing beads for sale, Mama Masai, the elegance of your bare back, dried breasts swinging, and the laugh with which you throw back your head and jeer at the sun, you mother of soft Acholi love songs. And you of the red ochre eye, you of the cold-rimmed eyes and soft dark skin, I believe in you, my sister, before you, what the heck, my brother too. And though beautiful people smile, and beautiful people explode in the bathroom of the girlfriend's house, no one, I said no one is as beautiful as you. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, all you beautiful people, for coming out here this evening. Thank you, Valerie Mason-John, for starting off this night so wonderfully. Thank you, Siobhan, for stepping into the spot. And thank you to all the poets who you had just heard. One of the great conversations that Valerie and I had when we went to go meet with George Eliot Clark and Karina Vernon was how are we going to word the call for submissions? How are we going to encourage Black people to contribute to this anthology, and with the knowledge that not all so-called Black people respond to being called Black people. Not all so-called African Canadians have an ethnicity that is African, or some of them have, you know, various feelings about the Canadian thing as well. So we had a good brainstorming session. We had a good brainstorming session. We tried to be as all-inclusive as possible. But one thing Joy mentioned was we're really standing on the shoulders of giants with this work. One thing you'll notice in this anthology is intergenerational, which I think is cool. You know, we had a great author kind of refuse to submit any poetry, and which is totally okay. He wrote a book, and on the cover of that book is a statue of a child on his father's shoulders. But that's kind of how I see this whole thing that we call the Great Black North. I had gone to a Black British Columbians conference last year at UBC and met Cynthia Dillard, who's she's the head of education at University of Georgia, and she had said something that stuck with me, and that was that she didn't like referring to our people as people of African descent. She said, we're people of African ascent. And so when we were deciding on how to word the dedication, because this is a book of contemporary African Canadian poetry, we chose to word it as such. As the living ascendants, we acknowledge the roots of our poetic traditions and dedicate this anthology to the memory and spirit of the people, families, and communities who are no longer with us, except through their defining works that continue to inspire us. So, we're going to continue with some inspiring poetry from Storma Sire, who is an author, illustrator of the children's novel Lessons in Magic, poet, artist, creative writing and art instructor, neighbor, and co-founder of the first Sickle Cell Association of BC. Please welcome Storma Sire.
Quite the event, and again, I have to say thank you to both of you for what you've done. This has been just amazing. All these faces, all these people here, and before I read my small poem, I just wanted to say that I'm grateful to be Canadian and to be here in Canada. And my poem kind of grumbles a little bit because I was going through some health challenges with sickle cell anemia, and it can be tough living here physically. So that's sort of what the poem was about, and it's not me grumbling that I hate being Canadian. It was just the weather was so chilly that day when I was dark and need of sunlight. So I wanted to say that I'm very, very grateful for being Canadian. And I also wanted to say that I didn't know that this was the very first Canadian Black poetry anthology in Canada's history. That's enormous. And so this is amazing what you guys have done. It's profound, and so I'm very, very grateful to be part of this to be able to participate in such a great work. So anyway, here's my grumbling poem. It's called Greener Grasses. And here I thought I was Canadian. I'm poorly built for this weather. I need heat and sun, said the doctor. Diagnosed at age 7 with sickle cell anemia, a mutation of malaria affecting those from tropical climates, making me immune to malaria. What good it does me here in Canada. Perhaps in 100 years of global warming, all the pine trees are killed by pine beetles, and instead they are planting palm trees instead of pine trees, and Vancouver is pushed further inland, and the tropical insects find a new home. Then maybe finally I will be built for this weather. And I'm just going to say something briefly at the end. Again, I'm very grateful to I just wanted to say that for those people out there that are wanting to write and getting into art and getting into these things, it's so important to just get out there and do it. Submit your work and submit your art and write your paintings. Write your paintings, yes. And play your music and really do your best to get your work out there, because you just never know what life brings you and what can come of it. So I just wanted to say thank you and have a great evening.
The Great Black North is a land where identity is created as much as it is inherited. This anthology is an effort to recognize the poetic traditions of peoples of African descent or ascent in Canada, as well as establish a new tradition for the spoken word generation of wordsmiths, dub poets, lyricists, MCs, performance poets, and slammers who have been performing their orature at the highest levels locally, regionally, provincially, nationally, and on international stages. This past Friday, February 1st, there was a great event at City Hall, and some of us got to share our poems. And Siobhan Barker, who will be sharing her poem next, I'll have you know that all the poets who are in the audience were acknowledged. Siobhan is a bilingual singer, storyteller, published fiction, non-fiction author, facilitator, and textile artist committed to responsible reconsumption. And so it's Mama said put a hat on, putahaton.com. All right. Please welcome Siobhan Barker.
Okay, I see people have come with their poems in hand. I've run across town, so I need a copy of my So for all those that are, you know, in a pinch to find me, it's page 183. Oh wait, did you all say something inspirational before you began? Is that something? Okay, let me look out into the room and see who's here. Hello, everyone. I've been hiding from, well, not purposefully, but through just not really having a social life. You may have thought that I was perhaps on tour. That's what people often used to think. And sadly now, people don't ask me what show I was touring with. They just assume that I have no desire to be part of the world, and that they just sadly look and wave and try not to give me too many details about the fun weekends that they've had. So, I didn't rush here from something fun and entertaining. Would that I could share that that's what made me late, but sadly no. Although there is much fun to be had in having a 16-year-old, that's how old my son is now. It's the kind of fun that makes you want to claw tiny grooves out of your flesh. And sometimes out of his. It's a special kind of fun. A mother fun. Now this piece, unlike some pieces that I've written in the past that do tap into the angry black woman, or you know, the I'm going to tell it kind of strong sister kind of, yeah, this piece is, it's not one of those. Yeah, it's not one of those. It's a little lighter, a little fun, a little racier. In fact, I almost had to pause because a few friends have sent their children with a book saying, oh, because oftentimes, Teacher Siobhan, we hear you've written a poem. Yeah, I said, oh, you haven't read it, right? Yes, Teacher Siobhan has written a poem. Can you sign it for us, Teacher Siobhan? I said, oh yeah, just read the signature part. That's the only part to read right now. So for all of you that can do above PG readings, here we go. It's called The Call. My pulse quickened at the sound of the ringtones. Would he be home? Please be home. Hello, he says. I hadn't quite figured out what to say. Now I could mention the way that my chest tightened, hovering between breaths, with just the sound of his voice. I could mention the slight sheen forming on my lower lip, as memories of a kiss played with my senses. I could tell him of hungry sessions when I drew pleasure, remembering the path of fingers traveling over hot, moist valleys, secreted between thighs. I could say how his voice held a promise of strength and a whisper of urgency, not to be denied.
I could breathe in and revel in the distant echo of his sensual scent, remembering being roused to a point that threatened both our resolves. I lick my lips. I tremble. The memory of passion's salty, sweet taste. Hello? Is anyone there? He asks. I took a deep breath, pushing back the whirlwind of wayward images. Hi. It's so good to hear your voice. Thank you for putting this anthology together. Come on, Valerie.
When I first started doing this kind of performance poetry, I was really inspired by poetry slams, and that's when I started writing for performance. I think a lot of it had to do with using my voice. So in this, you know, sometimes we like to say, oh yeah, like, I like to spit fire. But spit is an appropriate verb for, you know, speaking poetry. I think it's an appropriate verb anyway. So I conceived of 7 laws of spit. Number 1, spit not in the wind. 2, be not too proud to spit your truth out loud. 3, as a man thinketh, so too he spitteth. 4, spit not lest ye be spit upon. 5, the best spitter is a better listener. 6, actions spit harder than words. 7, a word spat is a bond intact. So, one more time, thank you to Vancouver Public Library for allowing us to come into this space. Thank you, David, thank you, Amber, and everyone else. Thank you to my co-editor, Valerie, and to the publishers, and to the publishers, David and Rose, to our publicist, Lynn. Thank you to everyone across the country who sent in their poems, and thank you to all the poets who were here this evening to share their work. A year ago at City Hall, I was basically, well, I guess I could have been standing at the crossroads and, you know, Legba kind of offered a contract to commission a poem for Black History Month. So I said, okay, you know, I'll write something to kind of, you know, signify the proclamation of Black History Month that the city of Vancouver was being prepared to share. So I came up with a poem. It had a few names and a few themes in it, and in, I think, a kind of a poetic premonition, one of the phrases kind of ended up being the title of this work. So that was very unintentional. However, I will claim the double entendre. So the poem is called I Am Acclaimed, Van Rock, and it was performed on the occasion of the City of Vancouver Black History Month proclamation, delivered in Council Chambers, January 31st, 2012. I am acclaimed, stretching forth her hands across continental coastlines, like a maverick reporter conducting timely interviews to be printed in provincial freedom papers across chronologies and cultural spectrums. Like a crimson tide, I ride up and over the 49th parallel, shedding flesh like orange peels on the deck of a Commodore. I will not settle for less than these amber valleys and green maple leafs. I ride the rails like George, from the Maritimes of the Costa to the blues of Terminal City. I smile in the pale face of adversity and sleep with my brothers, dreaming of a land promised to be my own, after overseeing fields of tobacco, cotton, indigo, like the time I took to smell the fleur-de-lis, poppies, roses, tulips, and violets, scents that travel me to childhood, snuggled on mother's continent. I have these hands with brown rivers scripted in identified flesh, where north and south rivers match with the great seaway and empty out into the bay. I would not trade them for the skins of other lived things, and I will use them to hold my own on this native land, kept and broken, written and spoken, drummed and danced. I am whirling furor of black cowboys lasso, the stampede after the rush, a fly in a pail of milk, the conductor of symphonies, wearing authentic gold medals and keeping it real like McCoy. I am dropped gloves off high-scoring hands, boxing jabs and feather pens, ceremonial swords of pioneers, loaded African rifles. I am clenched fists of short-lived sprinters, the mad dashes of hyphenated titles, Afro-Caribbean and more, a free African on Canadian shores, of the great black north, proud I am. All right, and please welcome Valerie Mason-John.
So I had hoped that we would finish on Kevan's joyous poem. Mine isn't so joyous, but it's an important poem. And it was really interesting because I really struggled writing something new. I wanted to write something new. What's quite interesting is that there were many contributors we wrote to who were known as poets, but they don't write poetry anymore. They're writing fiction. And I'm one of those people who started off writing poetry, and I don't really write poetry anymore now. I write fiction or non-fiction. And so it was really interesting to get myself into that headspace, and I ended up putting something in that I had written, which was old, but I wasn't satisfied. And it wasn't until I went to England and I had some headspace and I was talking to a friend and I thought, oh yeah, that's what I could write. And for me, what's really important is that actually I realised that this was an important voice, because I wanted people 50 years on to open this book and actually see a part of themselves reflected in this book. So you'll know what I mean when I read the poem. But I have a question for you. How many of you have ever been to Yellowknife? Put your hands up. Okay, Yellowknife. So this poem is actually, it's historical, it's based on fact. I wrote it from court transcripts. Constance Backhouse is the only other person who's actually written about this particular person in her book called Carnal Crimes. So it's a 1950s black African-American woman in Yellowknife. What was she doing in Yellowknife? She was in relationship with a white Canadian woman in Yellowknife. What were they doing? This is the story. The poem's called Yellowknifed. When it was a mere 20 below, I'd think, boy, this is a great day. I can push back my parka hood. I was used to New York winters. This was nothing. 1953 Yellowknife, in love with Beatrice Gonzalez, followed her home to her native Canada, found work in a government office typing pool. Some of us slept on the floor when it was too cold to go home. We'd fall asleep exchanging stories of our past. Some women made it clear to me my type of life was quite foreign. They had absolutely no interest in me. I made it clear I was not desperate. That would be foolish. Beatrice was a professional woman of good standing, vice principal. I was content with my comfortable life. Now you see, had I been a man, I could have got away with touching a woman's cleavage, lifting her petticoat up, even rubbing against her genitals. If the woman tried to press charges, she would be told she had encouraged it. Asked what was she doing alone in a room with a man who wasn't her husband. Told she must have made advances. An attempted kiss would have been considered trifling, nothing to write home about. Headline read, first same-sex lesbian case, branded a freak of nature. The public needed to be protected. Yellowknives were out to get me. Gross indecency was my crime. Nobody asked me any questions. Guilty on a white woman's evidence alone. In court, Laura claimed that she looked up at me from her desk. I was supposed to have looked strangely at her. A rather concentrated look. She claimed to look down. She said I grabbed hold of her, tried to kiss her. As she pushed me away, I was to have said, "You're very cruel." And she began to cry. Of course I looked at her, even undressed her with my eyes, and she undressed me too. "Exotic," she whispered. In the next breath she spat out, "You beast." She locked eyes with me, our lips brushed, and she cried, "No, stop, I can't, I'm not strange like you." I was the first woman arrested and tried in a Canadian court. Gross indecency against another woman. I was yellow-knifed, I was black. Guilt.